Hello, and welcome to this First Friday Google Plus Hangout on strengthening the commitment, helping all kids grow up at a healthy weight. I'm Susan Dentzer, Senior Policy Advisor to the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and I'll be your moderator for this discussion today. These monthly Google Plus Hangouts are one way that the Foundation seeks to keep people informed about the Foundation's priorities, about the people at the Foundation who are carrying them out, and about the grantees and other partners and stakeholders who are helping us in this important work to advance the culture of health. Many of you watching today know that the Foundation recently announced that it would devote another $500 million to the effort to combat child obesity in America. That's on top of a prior $500 million commitment for a total of $1 billion. There are several key prongs of this strengthened recommitment, and a particular focus will be reducing racial and ethnic disparities in obesity in children as the Foundation seeks to build this culture of health for all in the United States. As today's Hangout proceeds, we hope that you'll send us your questions via Twitter. The address, as you can see on your screen, is hashtag RWJF 1ST Fry. So that's 1ST as in first, Fry, of course, as in Friday. We have three terrific speakers today who will be discussing some of the who's, the how's, and the why's of ensuring that all children do grow up at a healthy weight. And let me introduce them to you now. First, we're very happy to have with us Ginny Ehrlich, who's Director of Child Obesity at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We're also happy to be joined by Ed Foster-Simeon, who's President and CEO of the U.S. Soccer Foundation, an organization that is doing a great deal to partner with RWJ as a grantee of the foundation. And Maya Rockeymoore, we're also very happy to have with us. She's President and CEO of the Center for Global Policy Solutions, also an RWJF grantee. We're going to start today with Ginny Ehrlich. Ginny, would you give us an overview, if you would, of the Foundation's strength and commitment now to combating child obesity and key aspects of this new phase of the program?
Hello, and thank you so much, Susan and Maya and Ed, for being here. It's been a month and a day since many of us were together in New York City announcing the redoubling of our efforts to ensure all kids, no matter who they are, where they live, grow up at a healthy weight. We are so excited to have revealed that we're in this for the long haul. We know that there's been some progress. We know that progress is fragile and uneven, and so we know that we really need to stay the course in order to ensure that every kid grow up healthy. Some of the good news is that we've seen some early signs of progress amongst our youngest kids. Preschoolers in 19 states from low-income families have shown a decline in child obesity. Many cities and states are reporting the positive results. The troubling aspect is, though, that we're still seeing great disparity gaps amongst children who are living in poverty and amongst African American, Latino, and Native American children. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we know that we will not succeed until every child has the opportunity and access to safe places to play, healthy and affordable foods, and everything we know kids need to be healthy and thrive moving forward. And that's really going to be a centerpiece of the work that we do moving forward. It's going to be something that we think about in every investment we make, and something that we make concerted investments in moving forward. We announced also 5 big bets, 5 areas where we believe we can really make a difference, and cumulatively will really make a difference for kids across the country. And they are that we ensure that every child enter kindergarten at a healthy weight. We know that if a child enters kindergarten at a healthy weight, he or she is more likely to graduate from high school at a healthy weight and maintain a healthy weight into adulthood. We want to ensure that every school across the country is a healthy place, a place where physical activity, healthy eating, emotional health is at the forefront of thought and integrated into everything that schools do. We want to make physical activity a part of the everyday experience for children and youth. Over the past decade on working on this issue, we know that we've made a little more progress on the healthy eating side than we have the physical activity side thus far. So this is an area where we're going to be really honing in and identifying how we can make a difference. We want to make healthy foods the affordable option in every community in the United States so children and families can really access these, and we want to create demand for these healthier options. And then lastly, we want to make sure that kids under 5 don't consume sugar-sweetened beverages. We know that's a single, it's not a single contributor, but it's a simple solution that we know will contribute to kids growing up at a healthy weight. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to hear from Maya and Ed, who have been on the forefront of this work, especially around ensuring that all kids have access to what they need, and looking forward to the dialogue today.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Jenny. Well, Ed, as Jenny said, part of this commitment is really ensuring that kids have daily physical activity, which is where, in particular, the U.S. Soccer Foundation and your Soccer for Success program comes in. Tell us some about that, if you would.
Yeah, so we see, thank you so much for having me on this event today. We see soccer as a vehicle to improve health and social outcomes for children. And we have a particular focus on creating opportunities for children in underserved communities where they generally do not have as easy access to organized sports play, and the social infrastructure is not there to support those kinds of activities in the community. So Soccer for Success is our evidence-based program that uses soccer to deliver 60 minutes of physical activity 3 days a week, 12 weeks during the fall, 12 weeks during the spring, in the after-school hours. We leverage our coaches to not only teach the kids soccer, but while they have them and have their attention, to impart information to them about nutrition, leading active, healthy lifestyles, giving them guidance on what are good foods and healthy foods to eat. Part of our philosophy is that coaches are incredibly influential people in the lives of children. In fact, they're, as we view it, are underutilized national resources. Children go to school largely because they have to. They come running and laughing to their coaches because they want to learn from them and they want to have fun. So we found a way through Soccer for Success to use the training opportunity when children are playing soccer to incorporate learnings about nutrition and healthy, active lifestyles right in the form of play. The program is delivering good results. We've collected data over the past 3 years, and particularly as it relates to BMI and other critical measures, children who are in the overweight or obese category, 89% of those children see positive outcomes as it relates to their BMI. 75% of those children see positive outcomes as it relates to waist circumference, and 91% of children who are viewed at high risk in health categories see positive outcomes in terms of aerobic capacity. So it shows that you can leverage sport, which is often just viewed as fun and games, into a tool that can make a real difference in creating opportunities for children to live healthy, active lifestyles in communities, no matter where they live, no matter what their economic circumstances are. And the key for us is we focus on children in elementary and middle school, because one of the things that the Aspen Institute, for example, points out, that adolescents who participate in organized sports are 8 times more likely to be active when they're 24 years old. So getting the habit of being active and learning about healthy lifestyles and eating health at young age.
And Ed, as I understand it, your organization, as part of this commitment, is doing a great deal to make sure kids have safe places to play those sports, including, of course, in your instance, soccer, correct?
Absolutely. It's one thing to tell children to go out and play 60 minutes a day, but depending on where you live, safety is an issue, and the lack of facilities can be an issue. And so we make sure that children have safe playing fields in their communities. Sometimes that's a full-size soccer field, but in many other cases, It's a small, utilizing the available space in the community, which may be an underutilized tennis court, a school playground lot, and converting that into a small soccer space that children can use in the community, not only for regular programming, but for free play as well.
Great. Well, Maya, your organization has worked with the foundation on other aspects of healthy living in communities. How, as the foundation moves into this new phase of its commitment to combating child obesity, how do you see the challenge of reducing disparities that occur along racial and ethnic lines in child obesity rates, and how best we can attack them?
Right. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Jenny, for inviting me to participate today. And I'd like to congratulate the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation on doubling their commitment to childhood obesity prevention. This is an area that's critically important, not just for populations most affected, but for the entire nation, and especially for communities of color who have experienced severe disparities when it comes to overweight and obesity, particularly in childhood. And when you look at related diseases like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and stroke, all of these factors are actually undermining the health of African American, Latino, Native American communities, certain Asian Pacific American communities like Native Hawaiians and others. And so this doubling of the commitment and a focus on communities of color is especially important. And the statistics bear it out. 36% of African American youth aged 2 to 19 are overweight and obese. 37% of Latinos, compared to 29% of white children. And we know that American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian children have significantly higher rates as well, based on independent studies. And so we know that moving forward, we have to actually approach this in a smart way. Certainly, we should not give up the commitment of reducing childhood obesity overall, but we should actually implement targeted strategies, and we call this targeted universalism. Strategies that are universal in scope, whether universal is defined as your city or town or as the nation, but that has specific targeted levers within the policy strategies and the environmental strategies that actually focus on the populations of most need. And sometimes those populations can be defined as population group. Sometimes they can be defined geographically. But understanding where those pockets of need are, as has been borne out by the statistics and the epidemiological data, will help us actually create the nature of the solution, that targeted universalism solution, that will help us address disparities. Now, some people have asked the question, well, how do you develop targeted universalism policies? And that's an important question. And it's important to know that you should have a universal goal, and our universal goal is actually reversing the childhood obesity epidemic, regardless of where you live or who you are or what your history is. And that's a universal goal for the nation. But then we have to assess the difference between where we are overall and where our goal is, and that's usually where people stop, saying, well, you know, the obesity rate is here for the general population, and so we move forward with trying to address it generally. But we have to go a step further, and this is where the targeted universalism paradigm comes in, and that's assessing how far particular groups or areas diverge from the goal. And that is actually looking at those pockets of needs, understanding how much difference or their status, their subgroup status, differs from the general population, using tools like GIS and gap analysis and disaggregated data to help us understand how how much these populations differ from the overall population. And then addressing and assessing those barriers for these populations to achieve the goal. What are the unique challenges that they face that may prevent these subgroups or these sub-areas from reaching the goal? And then designing strategies in order to help them overcome these barriers and challenges. And that might include a needs assessment, accessibility audits, focus groups, really understanding the need from these populations. And then it's about crafting the approaches, the targeted strategies for helping these underserved areas or communities meet the universal goal, and then making sure that you're providing that treatment for that population and also in the universal context. So, you know, an example of this is Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the only area in the country that's experiencing, of those areas that have experienced a decline in their childhood obesity rates, Philadelphia is the only area in the nation that's actually experienced a decline in racial and ethnic disparities in those obesity rates. Particularly, I think that African American boys and Latino girls, they saw a significant decline in their overweight. And what Philadelphia did, is instructive to know, is that they used targeted universalism policies. They had a strategy for all of the schools in the Philadelphia area, but they added extra nutrition and physical activity measures for those schools that had a high percentage of free and reduced lunch students, meaning that they had high poverty rates in the schools. So they did an extra dose of treatment for the schools that actually had high poverty rates. And by and large, those schools were the ones that had higher rates of racial and ethnic minorities.
So as we've heard from all of our speakers, first of all from Ginny, that the foundation is in the fight against child obesity for the long haul. Despite, as she noted, some signs of improvement in the trends, there's a lot of work left to be done. And she described the 5 big bets that the foundation is now staking its money on, making sure that kids are at healthy weight by the time they get into kindergarten, making sure that all schools are healthy environments, making sure that kids have physical activity daily, making sure that healthy foods are affordable and that there's plenty of demand for them to help keep them affordable, and of course that kids under 5 not be drinking sugar-sweetened beverages. We heard, of course, from Ed that soccer can be a very important sport that can be leveraged in terms of getting that physical activity into the daily diet, if you will, of kids. And of course, one additional point I know that he's made in the past is that a benefit of soccer is it can be played as a co-ed sport. Boys and girls are both playing soccer every day throughout this country. That's a very important benefit as well. And then, of course, we heard from Maya about the whole notion of universal approaches to combating child obesity, but with a special targeted approaches to those communities most in need of redressing this problem. So thanks to all of you for making those overview points. Jenny, to come back to this notion of a universal approach with specific targeted focus on communities most in need, how does the foundation propose to work with partners and stakeholders to carry out those more targeted approaches and really address these disparities that we've all spoken about?
You know, I think I can give you some examples of how we're doing that now, and recognize that we're still learning. In fact, we're starting to work to identify the how on that, because we want to really ensure that we do this work in a way that is mindful and deliberate, and really carries some guiding principles around the importance of building community demand and customizing work that really meets the particular needs of a particular community, while recognizing that we're a national foundation. So I think that's work that will move forward. A few examples of how our work is targeted now. Maya talked about work in the city of Philadelphia. Nationally, we work with the Alliance for a Healthier Generation on the Healthy Schools program, a program that helps transform school environments into healthier places across the United States. Through that model, there are regional directors who oversee and work with schools in particular areas. And in terms of our work with the Healthy Schools program, we support these Healthy Schools program managers and directors who work in areas where there's disproportionate impact of the obesity epidemic, the South and Appalachia in particular. And within those regions, those Healthy Schools program directors are providing intensified assistance to schools serving predominantly high poverty kids. So that's one way of really having a universal goal of every school being a healthy place, and a targeted work to really ensure that the most intensified support is in areas of greatest need. I think that Ed's program is another example, and I'd love for him to speak to that in terms of really how soccer is being used as a vehicle, not only to promote physical activity, but to really promote overall community well-being and a culture in a community where people are coming together in areas impacted by this epidemic, as well as impacted by poverty and a lot of other challenges. So would turn it over to Ed to give the example from the U.S. Soccer Foundation.
Thank you, Jenny. You're really right on the point with that. The programming that we deliver in communities is often transformative in those communities. First of all, it fills a gap where there was no organized sports programming available to children in the community, so it provides that opportunity. But the wonderful thing about it is that, you know, community starts to build around what's going on the playing field. Not only are the children playing, but then suddenly you have moms coming out while their children are practicing or playing, and they're walking around the field, you know, to get their exercise, because, you know, children are very influential in the household. It's been quite interesting to watch. You have the coaches are talking to the children, you know, teaching them skills, soccer skills, but also telling them, you know, you should eat this healthy food or this healthy food, and the children go home and tell their parents that. And guess what? The parents want to deliver those things that their children want, that they know are good for them. I'll give you an example. We work in South Los Angeles, very tough neighborhood, you know, and it's a food desert. There are no grocery stores or whatever. The kids were going home talking to the parents about, coach says I should eat this, coach says I should eat that. And the parents came to the program operator and said, look, we can't get this. But the wonderful market to come out when the kids are practicing, so we can buy some of these foods. That's how you begin to build a culture of health in the community. You have, you know, the children playing there, the coaches are influencing the children are influencing their families, and then the community itself becomes a healthier place because other activities in that same community, the corner stores are now being asked to provide healthier foods or options for the children and the families in those communities. So a lot of wonderful things can happen using sport as a catalyst to transform communities into a culture of health.
Maya, I know you have concerns about adverse unintended consequences of some of these efforts, all of which are obviously extremely well-intentioned, but sometimes can have aspects that are, in fact, unintended. Can you give us an example of some of those concerns and how we can be attuned to them as the Foundation's work in this area proceeds?
Yeah, well, you know, what's interesting, one example that I'll give is, you know, in San Francisco last year, and actually Ed can speak to this as well, you know, in many urban areas, you have limited play space, as Ed mentioned, limited parks and recreation. And so in San Francisco, a viral video was done last year where, you know, an area that has been gentrified was the site of a contestation between the primarily Latino kids who had been using a particular park to play soccer for like forever. It was their park. They were used to playing soccer there, and they, you know, they never had to do anything except show up and play. And yet they came to their soccer play space and found out that that these other people, particularly they were older white guys, who actually worked for a large company in the area, had basically claimed their staked their claim and said that they had reserved the spot. They had reserved it and the kids couldn't use it. And so lo and behold, it turns out that the city of San Francisco used a new, basically technology to create a reservation system that the guys who the older white guys knew about, and they went online to sign up and used their app to sign up, but that the young Latino kids had no knowledge about. They hadn't, you know, they just didn't know about it. So what you saw was a clash of cultures, a clash of opportunity in terms of access to technology and knowledge. And what policymakers and city leaders and community residents need to understand is that as we build a culture of health in this country, we need to make sure that that the opportunities, the amenities, the facilities are equally and equitably shared amongst community members, and that we're not creating these unintended consequences in terms of the demand for play spaces and physical activity spaces being fought over, and that it's inclusive in terms of how we actually make sure that people have access. And that's true not just in terms of physical activity space, but also in terms of affordable eating as well.
So this question of health equity really comes up as we move forward in this arena. In fact, we have a question that has come in on that point. How is the foundation thinking about health equity in the movement to end child obesity? Jenny, let's come back to that. I know obviously that is front and center of the foundation's new commitment. That's what the focus on disparities is all about. But as we move forward in this arena and are attentive to those kinds of unintended consequences Maya mentioned, how does the foundation plan to keep the health equity piece of this front and center?
You know, as I mentioned, our new goal of every child, no matter who they are or where they live, growing up at a healthy weight, is really about establishing that equity and looking at policy levers, systems levers, practice levers that ensure that the work that we're doing, while universal, because we know that we want all kids to grow up at a healthy weight, is also targeted in areas where we know that there are huge disparities still. So really looking at some of the things that Maya talked about in terms of making sure that there are not only play spaces available, but there's equitable access to those play spaces, and that you know, best-intentioned policymakers don't create barriers for kids to play in favor of others who might have more structural access. So those are some of the things that we'll be working on in terms of really creating the national tools, systems, policies to support, while also looking at how we intensify and target our practice-based efforts in areas that are most impacted by the epidemic. It's something that we're going to consider in everything we do. It's something that we're measuring. It's something that we're going to keep score on as we move forward, so we can keep ourselves accountable to these goals as well. We also, within the 5 big bets, we'll really look at how those play into equity. For example, healthy and affordable foods. Affordable is in there because we know that people in low-income neighborhoods are half as likely to have grocery stores or access to fresh foods. How do we really shift those systems, shift the food system so that the food in every neighborhood is healthy and affordable? How do we work with businesses, et cetera, to really look at price point issues and pricing strategies to make healthier options more affordable? So we need a lot of partners as we move forward in really thinking this through. And I think that Maya's example on the physical activity side is emulative of policymakers, of local businesses, of planners in terms of how we move forward on a physical activity front. And you know, similarly, we need a broad array of partners on the food front.
Ed, I wanted to come back to you. Your Soccer for Success program, as I understand it now, is in 34 cities. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there's a desire to spread that, and we know that, as with so many actions and the ability to influence health, we very often know what works. It's really just a question of spreading what we know works as broadly as possible. What plans are underway now to extend the reach of programs like Soccer for Success, get the tools that I know you've developed out more broadly? Essentially, you've got a guidebook for coaches as to what to say, what nutrition messages to give to kids. How do we really scale that up as a country and meet this goal of having kids everywhere have access to daily physical activity?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. Taking a program to scale like that is really the ultimate goal. You know, We're currently reaching about 30,000 children in the cities that you mentioned, 34 cities. But obviously there are hundreds of thousands, a million children who could benefit from a program like Soccer for Success. So we're talking with other child-serving organizations, training others in how to implement the programming, and hoping that others will adopt Soccer for Success programming as a tool to create opportunities for children to be physically active and to gain the nutritional education that they can receive in a fun way that they can absorb and apply in their everyday lives. It is challenging though because it costs resources. You know, a lot of sports programming in this country today is based on a pay-to-play model. You know, I have 4 children, all of whom play sports, and you know, fortunately, I've been in a position in my life to be able to write the checks, you know, for the various sports activities that they participate in. But if you're talking about low-income communities where resources are stretched thin, then we have to find other ways to create opportunities for children to have access to that type of program. They should not be denied simply because they cannot afford to play in an organized sports program. We have to find opportunities to leverage existing resources and existing time in the day to create a space for this.
As we know, there's been a big push to get schools, as a matter of policy, to put more activity back into the school day through PE programs perhaps, but also through just direct attention to the notion of having kids get up and stretch and take breaks during the day to be physically active. We know, of course, that some of the communities least able to incorporate PE back into schools are going to be these underserved communities. So how much of this is going to have to fall to philanthropy and other sources of support behind organizations and programs like Soccer for Success versus potentially getting them actually into school curricula, do you think?
Well, before I answer, I'd like to actually point to another RWJF grantee who's helping to spread the ability of communities to actually integrate total health into physical activity, and that's Childhood Obesity 180's Healthy Kids Out of School program, and they have a Healthy Kids Hub, healthykidshub.org. So if you're a coach of any kind, there's a resource, or a parent who's coaching, there's a resource out there for you, healthykidshub.org. But in terms of the question you know, actually repeat it,
of course, everybody's hope would be that schools would incorporate more physical activity directly into the school day. How much of it is going to be feasible versus adding on programs like Soccer for Success, after-school programs that are separately funded?
Susan, it's all about priorities, and our children's health is the #1 priority. And the fact of the matter is that philanthropy does not have enough resources to bring all of these programs to scale by themselves. We actually do have to make policy change. And at one time in America, we actually did have a physical activity in schools, and we can have that again, quality physical activity. So currently what we're seeing is schools bringing in programs and, you know, things like, you know, integrating physical activity in the classroom. But the fact of the matter is if you care about academic achievement and the child's total health and wellness, then you have to be focused on physical activity, because the evidence is clear that physical activity is actually linked to better academic outcomes for kids, better academic outcomes, but also better classroom behavior, more concentration. The evidence is increasingly showing that there is a link. And so we have to do something on the policy front, and I'm very encouraged that we're recentering this as a priority.
Jenny, we had a Google Hangout last September, you'll recall, that we devoted to the whole conversation about healthy meals, especially healthy eating in schools. One of our questioners today writes in, what role do school meals have in getting kids to grow up to be healthy? It's worth us coming back to that conversation we had in September, at least briefly, to talk about the Foundation's focus in that arena as well.
Absolutely. You know, kids are estimated to eat up to 2/3 of their calories at schools. So particularly kids who qualify for free or reduced lunch and breakfast programs. And for that reason, school meals play a pretty critical role in looking at the overall health. And so we're really excited to see that 90% of schools have started to implement the school lunch standards around the Health and Hunger Free Kids Act. And guess what? Kids like the changes. School administrators like the changes. The vast majority of parents and public are really excited about the changes. There are studies that are showing that kids' plate waste, which has been a discussion in the media, when we really look at the data, what we see is that as much food is being eaten now as was before the regulations passed. So we're seeing, I think, a resurgence and a culture change in schools around more fruits and vegetables in school meals programs, healthier options, and we're seeing that there's a really positive response overall to those changes. So we are looking forward to continuing to help schools think about how to do this in a way that's affordable, desirable to their kids, and really can be ingrained into the culture, because we also know that where we've seen the most success, there's also been an integrated effort to incorporate nutrition education into the curriculum, to really communicate with kids as well as their parents as to why this is important, not only from a health perspective, but like Maya said with physical activity, we know that kids who eat school breakfast perform better. So we also know that there are benefits from an academic perspective and a behavioral perspective when kids have access to food and healthy food at school.
Ed, I spoke several days ago to a researcher who's been involved in evaluating the Soccer for Success program, who told me that her hypothesis was that, as you said, one of the very powerful pieces of this program is the mentorship from the coaches, and the fact that students form such a bond with their coaches and are so admiring of their coaches. When their coaches say, you ought to really eat this, they listen. The other factor that she pointed to is giving kids the confidence that they can play sports. Many of the kids grow up not playing sports as really young kids and get into their later elementary school years and really don't know the first thing about it, feel awkward about it, and these programs are a way of shoring up their sense that they can be physically active. Have you found that broadly to be the case in the Soccer for Success programs? And if so, how can we tap into that special magic to give kids a greater sense of confidence about physical activity?
Well, you're absolutely right that there is a certain level of competence and confidence that comes from, learning a sport or playing a sport and being physically active. It's just at a conference where there's the concept of physical literacy, of children learning how to control their bodies, to run, to jump, to play, and to be active in ways that we took for granted a number of years ago because there were so many opportunities to play sports in school, be physically active. Now children have so few opportunities that they don't learn those things. So we think it's really important, and the evidence supports it, that if you can get children engaged in physical activity and sports programming early in life, they develop the competency that they need that makes them confident enough and they enjoy it enough that they will continue well into adulthood. And this is what it's really all about. We're not talking about solving a problem only at the childhood age. We're trying to build a way where children are playing soccer, and then as young adults they're playing soccer, and as senior citizens they're playing soccer, or whatever other sport that they enjoy, that they are physically active throughout their lives, not just in a small window of time, that it becomes a way of life. And this is where coaches are so influential. They make a good coach make sport fun and enjoyable, and allows children the opportunity to develop skills and see themselves grow and improve that make them want to continue to. So that, to me, is the real gift of science, is that it carries over in so many different parts of life, not just on the playing. Those same children learn, teamwork, discipline, hard work, resilience, how to win gracefully, how to lose gracefully. They behave better in school, they achieve better in school. So building a culture of health, having sport in a community is central to a healthy community, particularly for young people and children.
And the coaches in the Soccer for Success program, these are not World Cup coaches, right? These are teachers typically in the schools who get this additional training and support to become soccer coaches, correct?
They're people right from the community. Some of them have soccer experience, some do not have soccer experience. We train them on how to deliver soccer programming, the drills and the skills that they need to teach the children. But, you know, it really, the best coaches are the ones who care about developing the whole child, and that they are focused on teaching soccer, giving children a chance to play soccer, but also leveraging the opportunity of the engagement to give them the other information that they need that's going to make them successful in their lives and healthy, happy young people. That includes nutrition education, encouraging them to stay in school, out of trouble, avoid gangs, and all those things that can derail a young life. So the influence of a coach is a powerful tool, and we believe that it's just not leveraged well enough to get the big enough bang that we think is available for the country.
So as we get towards the top of the hour, I wanted to turn to each of you and ask you what you think is the most important next step, particularly for a community that is looking at potentially, as so many are, a disparity in its rate of childhood obesity along racial and ethnic lines. Clearly a need to have a universal approach to make sure that all kids have the opportunities Jenny described to enter kindergarten at a healthy weight and so on, but really has no clue how to get started with this other than some of the things that are already in place. As Jenny mentioned, the healthier eating in schools now as a consequence of federal policy and so on. To think seriously about how to step up the game, as it were, in terms of physical activity in particular, how to get started. And Maya, I want to start with you on that. What do you think is the number one thing that communities need to focus on as they get going?
Well, I actually put in a sales pitch for our Action Strategies Toolkit, which is basically a roadmap. If you are a community that actually wants to get started, there are a number of strategies in here that you can pursue in order to basically begin to address your issues. But with that, I want to kind of emphasize civic engagement and civic health, if you will, that communities need to be engaged to actually find out what their concerns and priorities are, and then to begin to leverage and work with community members in order to be able to address the change that they seek. So in addition to the policy and program and environmental strategies that are available, I want to emphasize that community engagement, engaging those disparately impacted populations, will be incredibly important.
Great. Ed, how about you? What would you say?
I would say the first thing, obviously my emphasis is on sport and particularly on soccer, but I would say that communities recognizing and embracing sport as being more than about just running games, embracing it as being an essential part of a healthy community, part of the fabric of life in a community that will lead to better outcomes for their children and for their community. That said, taking advantage of every opportunity, we were talking a little while ago about the cutbacks in school PE and all that because of the pressure to improve academic outcomes. The window between 3 and 6 p.m. in the afternoon is a critical time for children. That time between when they get out of school and the time that their parents typically get home from work is an opportunity to deliver physical activity in a way that not only helps the children in terms of their health outcomes, but provides positive activities for those children during a critical time of the day.
And Jenny, we're going to give you the last word on this.
So I think I'll use 2 words and give a few examples. One word is listen, and the second word is partner. A couple of examples. Maya had mentioned Philadelphia, where we've seen great or good success in terms of closing some of the disparity gaps. Interestingly, in some of the communities in Philadelphia most impacted by the epidemic, when when the city did engage in civic engagement, what they learned was that these families were not going to some of the large national chains we sometimes think about in terms of food access, but instead they were going to local Chinese restaurants because the food was affordable and you could get a high volume. So the city partnered with the Chinese Restaurant Association around a sodium reduction initiative and helped these restaurants really shift how they cooked and how they prepared to reduce sodium. They couldn't have gotten there had they not listened, and I think it's a great example of a partnership that isn't one we naturally think of. So I'll stop with that example because I know we're short on time, but I think listen and partner are really key elements of the work.
Well, I want to thank all three of our terrific speakers today, Ginny Ehrlich at Foster-Simeon and Maya Rockymore, for a terrific discussion. And as Ginny said, listening and partnering with all of you who joined us on the Hangout today is a critical goal for the Foundation, and we all look forward to working forward with you as we continue with this renewed commitment to combat child obesity. We hope that you will join us on April 3rd for the next First Friday on Health. The focus then will be on the 2015 edition of the County Health Rankings and Roadmaps that has been sponsored by the Foundation for some time. The 2015 results are interesting and exciting, and we'll be discussing the roadmaps, the action strategies to enable communities to move forward in attaining a true culture of health. So we hope you'll join us then. Thanks again for everybody for hanging out with us today. Thanks to our speakers. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. Have a great day.